IBM recently conducted a global telecommunications consumer survey which polled more than 13,000 consumers in 24 countries, including South Africa, to assess general attitudes, including consumer spending priorities, grievances and information sources for products and services. Suren Govender, Telco Solutions Lead for IBM MEA, joins me in studio to give us some background on the Global Consumer Telco Study, as well as to share the results relevant to the South African markets. Welcome.
Thank you, Natascha.
Now, before we get into the results of the survey, can you contextualize things for us? What's the difference between ISP and CSP, and how do the two complement each other?
We obviously seeing a merge between terminologies, but traditionally CSPs are people who own the networks and run the service on those networks, and ISPs are those who offer that as value-add services. But as I said, there's a lot of merging going on with the terminology. Our survey specifically targeted network telcos, and it related to all of those service offerings that we see them offer.
Now, we've seen a significant shift in the way we use the internet. It's not just about accessing emails anymore, screening the web. It's all about enhanced communication and social interaction. How have local CSPs adapted to this trend?
From our survey results, we see a significant shift in terms of how the consumer is using that technology today. I think one of the most stark results out of the survey showed us that South Africans, from a global perspective, actually are the highest users of social media as a means for communication. Now, how our local telcos are responding to that is probably less significant, because their networks are still in a build phase in many cases. They're still in a service build-out phase, and that engagement with those consumers is probably not at the level that they need to be at going forward.
I know the term dumb pipe has been bantered about by telcos. Of course, increased competition in the market, value-added services, OTT players. Why do you think there has been, besides the infrastructure, a delay in the way telcos are reacting to that?
So, using the term dumb pipe, it's actually not a bad, shouldn't be seen as a negative thing. One of the recommendations that IBM is making in our 2015 telco outlook is that telcos should decouple the network or the traffic from their revenues. That's important to ensure that the value on services and the engagement, the tight engagement with their consumers, it becomes more significant than just rolling out fiber optic cable.
And you mentioned the fact that I just think of any person I know from 18 to 25 stuck on their cell phones going on BBM, Facebook and Twitter. So keeping those trends in mind, are telcos gearing towards the younger side of the consumer market?
Not specifically. And from a segmentation perspective, that presents a massive opportunity for telcos. Some of the work and some of the products that we offer in the analytics space allow telcos to take advantage of that and of that opportunity. One sees a disproportionate trend, especially in South Africans younger than 25, who use social media as their primary form of communication, as opposed to voice or email. And that, again, that opportunity is there for the telcos to harness. And in terms of analyzing that far deeper, gaining a lot more insight into how their consumers think and behave and use their services in non-traditional ways is really where the opportunity lies for telcos.
Well, speaking of insights, let's get into some of the results of the survey. Now, you polled 13,000 users across 24 countries, including developed and emerging countries and economies. From a communications service perspective, what is the fundamental differences and nuances between developed and emerging territories?
Primarily, the mature markets or developed markets show a trend towards high levels of saturation in the telco perspective. So their revenues are starting to plateau. They are scrambling to discover and develop new services. To this end, we're starting to see a very informed and very connected consumer in the developing markets as opposed to the mature markets. And this is actually highlighted by the fact that a significantly higher use of social media and social networking is prevalent in developing markets as opposed to mature markets.
Because it's about economy of scale, looking at the size and the population of developing markets, let's talk about Africa. We know over 1 billion consumers living alone on the planet, the majority of whom access the internet, as you mentioned, via their mobile phones. From a growth potential perspective, is this where CSP should be looking to?
I think the opportunity lies in every market. Our global survey, and across all of the countries surveyed, the general trend is that consumers will increase spending on mobile, on telco services, on data services. This is even significantly higher in a market like South Africa and in some of the African markets. So there's definitely headroom for growth. But in addition to recognizing that there is growth potential, one also needs to understand that the consumer is making choices based on what's the behavior going on and the recommendations going on in their social networks, as opposed to what's being pushed as marketing plays by telcos. So that balance really needs to be understood to be successful in a large developing market like this.
Now, besides consumer and social behavior, there's increased competition in the mobile market. How can CSPs ensure that they attract and retain their customers? Is it about cost or is it about value?
I think the price plays cannot be ignored. However, our consumers are really telling us what they want, and they're telling us how they want it. So it's no longer just meeting a price point. It starts to become about the quality of the engagement, the multi-channel means of engagement through social media, and not just the traditional call center experience. In fact, more than half of the South African consumers will not even complain about poor service, largely because they experience around resolving those issues. So we're seeing a very powerful consumer emerging as almost redefining what this market will look like over the coming years.
Suren, thank you very much for sharing your insights today. That's Suren Govender, Telco Solutions Lead for IBM Middle East and Africa.